Yeah, so it's been a little while since I started out in my career, almost 15 odd years ago. But at Whitespace, so I'm creative director at Whitespace, creative agency in Edinburgh, and yeah, we've supported and worked with Creative Edinburgh right from the start. And at Whitespace, we try our best to help as many students and graduates. So we bring in placements. We do an internship program called the Oven. So I kind of see a lot of people kind of coming through the education system and then out into the wide world. And I can see it's equally exciting and also terrifying. And so it's great to be able to chat to Nikita and Ott today to kind of get their experiences of starting out into the freelance world, into the world of the creative community. And so we're going to cover a few topics that hopefully is relevant to people starting out. So to kick off, I think rather than me doing kind of an intro, I was going to let Ott and Nikita do a bit of an intro into themselves. So Nikita, do you want to kind of give us a bit of an intro into you and your work and your career so far?
Okay. Career slightly non-existent, but I only graduated a month ago. My name's Nikita. I just graduated from fashion, and I'm gonna share my screen so you can see some of the work I did. But I'm a fashion designer, a freelance digital artist, and a painter, and I guess a speaker now. But this is my concept shoot for my graduate collection called We Deserve a Seat at the Table. Sorry, let me take it so the tags aren't there. And it stemmed from my experience and my mum's experiences growing up being Indian in the UK. And my mum grew up in Crystal Palace in London, which at the time there were a lot of skinheads and it was very rough. My grandparents were immigrants. My mum was born in London. And all the conversations I've had with her about her experience, it also triggered a lot of her depression that she had for 30 years. And also being an Indian woman and marrying my dad, and it was a love marriage, but a lot of in-laws don't treat the women incredibly. So I call my collection We Deserve a Seat at the Table, because I thought, firstly, we do. We're powerful, intelligent, incredible women. And I think I wanted to fight for our equality in my own community, but even having a place in Britain. So it also stemmed from a lot of podcasts, which I have kind of dotted around my Instagram. So I'll show you guys that. But these are, yeah, pictures from my graduate collection. And then last year, which could have been a stupid decision, but I decided to start a t-shirt brand in my last year of uni. It probably was very silly. But these are, sorry. So I did a collaboration with someone, but these are the hoodies, and these were about COVID. There's a little line about Boris Johnson in there. I'm hoping no one likes Boris Johnson. But
I think
these are
you're on
some of
safe
my
ground there.
thanks. These are some of my t-shirts, and for the first drop, all the profits went to charity. And it was about embracing people of color. And then after that, certain percentage of profits went. But I also am a freelance artist for people in my dad's industry. So my dad's in the hemp and cannabis industry. So I freelance and do their artwork, and I work for him part-time as well, soon to be joining full-time. But that's some of the art for him. But that's just a brief intro on me.
Great. It's great to have a few side hustles going on whilst you're getting into your final year. And I should have said both Ott and Nikita graduated from ECA, but I don't think you crossed paths at the time at ECA. But Ott, do you want to give a bit of an intro into your work?
Yeah, let me share my screen quickly. So I actually graduated 2 years ago from illustration, but I had a bit of a like a different route into freelance. So I started off as a graphic design intern at ECA when I left. I then went on to be a studio technician in the illustration department for a year. And then following that, I became a freelancer, a graphic design and illustration freelancer for a year after that. basically because of COVID and there were no jobs around. So I thought I would try and make my own. So yeah, I have quite a diverse practice. I'm a designer, an illustrator, and a printmaker. So these are a couple of things that I worked on last year when I was working with clients on the design side. I also had some work in some exhibitions and illustrated. So it was a bit of a smaller part of my practice last year because I couldn't get into a workshop and I couldn't get any printmaking materials. So it kind of took a back seat, but I also do that. And I'm just starting a residency at Out of the Blue. My first day was the weekend. So I will be back in the workshop, which is going to be great. Exciting. And yes, now I'm working at Beer 52. Very quick, very quick intro. But basically, when I was a technician, I was working with lots of neurodivergent students and trying to make information from the course more accessible to them in terms of learning physically and also academically. So basically, when I left that job, I realized that I wanted to learn how to do that in a more applicable way, basically. So I decided that web design and digital design was kind of the way forward for me to learn how to do that properly. So I took on this job at Beer 52 as a junior web designer and also now illustrator. The links for the two websites that we've been working on recently, they're for micro brands. I've put in the chat. And yeah, basically just been doing lots of different illustration stuff and web design stuff for them. So yeah, that's very quick.
No, that's great. It looks really great. The Brave 52 stuff, the illustrations and everything looks really great. So
exciting.
Really exciting. So I guess like just getting into the detail of freelance life and the areas in terms of like when you guys were studying, did you have any kind of expectations of or did you even kind of think I want to be a freelancer or I want to work, or kind of did you have any expectations of what that would be when you graduated?
Do you want to go first?
You go.
I think I've always known I wanted to do it only because my dad's had his own business from before I was born. My grandma started it up and then he took over and added stuff to it. So I've always just been around people who work for themselves. And I've always worked for my dad since I was 18, so 5 years. And just watching him, I think, I don't know. I don't know if it's like, this could be a strange thing to say, but I just felt like it was in my blood and it's something I wanted to do. But having said that, when I went into fashion design at uni, I think it's all glamorized sometimes. So the idea of doing luxury fashion, I was like, oh, that's what I definitely want to do. I never thought the t-shirt side could even be an option. And then the more people I spoke to, I think everyone wants different things. And I like certain things and I know I would want a certain salary, for example, or I would want to be making certain income just to survive and even provide for my family if I have one later on. So I think the idea of luxury fashion slowly becoming a reality of I'm not sure if I want to completely go into it. So I tried to do as many things on the side and see what I like. And I have that kind of mind that I get quite busy in my mind. I like doing loads of different things. So having the t-shirt thing and then the freelance thing and then working with my dad and doing fashion at uni. I did a podcast as well at the same time in my last year. But yeah, it worked for me.
It's good to keep busy, I think, isn't it? It's always good to push yourself. And what about you? Did you have kind of any aspirations to be a freelancer when you were studying, or what was the kind of?
Honestly, no. Like I never thought I would be able to work for myself, to be honest. I found out in my last year that I had dyscalculia. I've always been terrible at maths, it's one of those things I was like, I can't work for myself because I can't do the money side of it. So I really never thought that would be an option for me. But sorry. But when I did graduate and there weren't any jobs after I left my last job, and I'm like you, Nikita, I just really love being busy all the time and I like having a diverse practice and I like doing lots of things. So lockdown for me was really difficult. So when I was like, oh, no one's getting back to me about these jobs, I might as well try and see how it goes. I just reached out to a few people and asked them how they found it. And I kind of thought that everyone knew what they were doing, and everyone was like, oh, like the money side just comes so easy. And actually most people were like, you know what, you just have to be confident, and you just have to ask people for advice and support, really. You know, like I did ask for help from some people in terms of pricing and the finance side of things, but actually when I did it, I know I'll go back to it, because the freedom of time and actually like communicating with different people all around the country. I was working with teams in China, and it was really, I like really loved working with so many different people and different clients. And actually the organization side of it was one of my favorite things to do when I got my head around it and found a system that worked for me. And then when I did get my head around it, I was like, oh, sorry, I live above a pub. But yeah, when I did get my head around it and I found something that worked, I found it really beneficial, and I found it actually improved my practice knowing how to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Interestingly, you find your kind of own way of doing stuff. I was kind of curious of, because I guess my freelance stuff has always been just a kind of side thing on top of work. But in terms of like navigating the whole finance, I guess for many people, that's a scary kind of thing, that you have to be self-sufficient, you have to have cash flow, you have to bill people, you have to send invoices to people, you have to get invoices, you have to get paid to do the work as well. Was there any kind of, how did you navigate that when you're starting out, you know, with your side hustle, Nikita, and your freelance stuff? Like, where do you start with that?
That was the hardest bit. I honestly, I know this sounds so bad, but you know, I wanted to start doing t-shirts. I thought, okay, I genuinely didn't think of all the additional costs. I knew there were going to be loads, because like I said, when I've gone to my dad's, there's clothing there and there's certain products, and I understand the labels, for example, and the shipping, that costs, and even doing the invoicing and the time out. I knew it all costed. I just didn't realize to the extent. I had a student loan, so I had money to help kick me off. I think my internet's slightly unstable, but I'm hoping it will.
I think you're back now.
I think through.
Maybe
but
a
yeah,
little bit,
I just found that side of things. It is sorry. Okay, after this I'll change my internet. But yeah, no, I honestly, it was the biggest reality check ever, because I remember the first time I was thinking, does it keep cutting out?
No, you're good. You're good at the moment.
Okay, yeah. Okay. No, sorry. I wanted the packaging to also be sustainable, because the t-shirts were organic cotton. So I wanted it all to kind of follow through, and doing that honestly costed quite a lot. And I was giving away, with everything, I was giving away stickers, I was giving away postcards, and then for the second drop, when I had money from the first one, I was giving away CBD pens, because I thought the whole thing was about taking care of yourself and your mental state and your anxiety. And I used to have I kind of do have bad anxiety, and I take CBD oil every day, and it's changed my life. And from having my dad's industry of understanding the benefits, I was like, okay, I want to do this and give them away. And then I was like, oh, that costs, doesn't it? So yeah, it's definitely a shock. And you know, when you start to add everything up and then take away from the profits, and then I wanted to give a percentage to charity. At the beginning, I was giving everything to charity, and then I was like, this isn't going to work out for me in the end. And even pricing things, like doing the artwork for my dad's suppliers, the amount of time and things like that, like I'll do it in the evening after my uni work, so I'm not thinking about how many hours I'm working. So there's so many aspects, and especially if you're doing it by yourself, because I did it all by myself. My mum and dad would help me pack some of the stuff sometimes, but I wasn't paying anyone else. But if I was, it's a reality check. Definitely, I don't think it's the only thing you should be doing. I know that I've spoken to people from other years, and the money they get back, it's just, at the beginning, I think it's very hard, unless you know you have financial support elsewhere. I personally just wouldn't advise doing just that.
Yeah, I guess you need kind of other income, if possible, from other sources to kind of sustain. I get many students, graduates that I speak to that come through kind of our intern placement schemes are all doing, you know, full-time jobs or part-time jobs during the day and then working, or even like working in the evenings and doing stuff in the day. It's yeah, it's pretty intense to be able to kind of do that. In terms of, you mentioned you kind of spoke with some friends to kind of get some advice. Did you find any kind of good sort of sources for other kind of official sources for advice for setting up finance or freelance stuff?
Yeah, in terms of, well, like when I started, basically, I just reached out to a few people that I had connected with when I was a technician. And that job was really helpful in me, like making me go out and meet people. And then I sort of reached out to them when I first came freelance, and I was like, look, do you have any advice? Like, how do I use the government gateway site? Like, someone please help me. So yeah, luckily Marco from Once Some Studio, he was super helpful. We'd connected the year before, and we'd done some work together as well. In the year before I became freelance, and he's like, look, here's the download. The government site is awful. This is just breaking it down for you, having done it myself. So that was like an absolute lifesaver for me. Because I think you could have like a great financial brain, but you might not necessarily understand that self-assessment website. And I still ended up having problems with it and had to do it by hand, which is actually quite handy because I got it wrong 4 times before I sent it off, you know. But yeah, just reaching out to people that I had worked with, and everyone was really kind and understanding. I kind of had to sort of get over my pride a little bit when I first started, because I was like, I can't do this myself. If I'm going to make the opportunities myself, then I need to actually be comfortable with reaching out to people and asking for work, or, you know, seeing if they know any clients that are looking for anything. I really needed to become comfortable with actually looking for things and actually asking for help. So that for me was really, really helpful, and just, yeah, Googling stuff. And luckily my dad has a maths brain, so that was quite helpful for me. But it was definitely a huge stress. I think I'd had like a couple of months before my contract ended, when I was working from home in my last job, where I was like, I can save some money so that if I can't find anything after this, like I know I have a few months buffer. So I kind of prepared for that when I was still earning. And I was applying for jobs as well, but I was like, I'm not hearing anything back, so I need a buffer, and this is going to be it, so I can pay my rent for so many months before I need to then try and pick up something. But the difficulty was there was no hospitality or nothing to buffer it. So I kind of just planned or saved as much as I could, and then hoped that would tide me over until I could find some constant work, which luckily it did. But I did have a few issues with some clients not paying, or wanting me to be an intern rather than a designer, so they wouldn't pay me but wanted me to come in. So there were lots of difficult, I think, being someone new to industry as well as a freelancer. I had a lot of imposter syndrome anyway, but then some people, I think, kind of thought that it was okay to not pay because of my age, and because of how new I was to industry, which was actually quite difficult in terms of paying rent and, you know, building that client base when you want to be confident, and, you know, you want to see yourself as like, yes, I can do this. Yes, I need to believe in myself, but I also do have a lot to learn. So it's a difficult balance, really. Starting out, it was quite confusing at times. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess when you're starting out as well, how do you, I mean, big question for people that are thinking about going freelance is like, well, how do I get clients? How do I get work? And have you got any kind of tips of how you did kind of land the first clients, or like...
Really just like emailing people as much as possible. Obviously it was kind of difficult because I want in-person networking events, but things like this I found really good. Just Instagram messaging people in our community here, and just asking them for advice on things, and sort of striking up a relationship with people like that. And then it sort of broadens your network to then look for work. So I found the networking side of it really important, and asking for advice first. And then I had the confidence to go and email people that I knew were part of agencies and you were looking for work. Things like the dots and LinkedIn and stuff like that were good for people looking for freelance things. And I really just tried to be as bold as possible. I was like, no one can see how stressed you are when you're sat behind a screen.
And that's the thing, when you've kind of got to put yourself out there and kind of you've got to ask. And it's surprising, I always kind of find how when you ask for help, people do help. Like people will help, people will give advice. You know, you'll often find people go, well, we're not looking for anyone, but actually I know someone, I just seen this posting on there that you'd be perfect for that. So like the networking, I find really, you know, when I was back kind of starting out, I was like, I hate that idea of like networking and speaking to people. I just hate it. But what I've kind of come to realize is there's so many different ways of networking that actually it's not necessarily that kind of cringy kind of way, but actually just reaching out, asking for help is a great way of actually just building that network. Do you find that's kind of I mean, it sounds like you both kind of find that that's a good route into kind of building, establishing relationships and your own sort of networks?
Yeah, 100%. I also think people who you least expect to reply actually do. So I think I DM famous stylists, people in the music industry. I DM some people who are never going to reply. I know I did, but I thought, you know what, their agent might see it. You don't know who will. Emailed loads of people. Yes, at first it genuinely feels so embarrassing when you're doing it. I think I felt more embarrassing doing the DMs than the email, because in my head I thought, oh, it might just go to junk, so they've just not seen it. Whereas DMs is genuinely, also it's kind of, there's a casual feeling behind it. So I just think DM as many people as you can. Also, I found it really helpful to say, please, can you spread the word through posts, like reposting on your social media, blah, blah. And they did. And some people, I said I'd gift them a few things. So I sent them a few t-shirts, and that's £25 out of my pocket for maybe times 3, 75. So I was out of pocket a little bit, but I knew I'd make it back if they shared it, because that'd be 3 or 4 more people buying something. So I think just DMing, marketing, putting on your Instagram stories, you actually wearing it yourself or whatever it might be. Marketing is, I think that's, you know what, you can have an amazing product or you can have an average product. Obviously we'd all want to make an incredible product, but I think the biggest thing is how you market it, genuinely.
It's interesting that, I mean, marketing works for the biggest companies in the world. Apple, you know, are great at marketing, but that applies right down to, you know, individuals. Like everyone is kind of, you have to think about like how you market yourself. I think we're kind of doing that at all times. So that's interesting. And I don't think that's something that really kind of gets taught at art school. Like you're kind of really concentrating on the craft and almost kind of business side of things. It's like, it's just not something that is really kind of touched upon. Did you find that during your course? And where do you kind of get those skills? You mentioned podcasts and stuff. Is there any kind of like good sources that you've kind of found that is good for, I don't know, like finding how to do these kind of things?
I think the fashion school was actually incredible at that, because our old head of fashion ended up becoming the head of the design school. So they were incredible in the third year. I think the third year and some parts in the fourth year, we had weekly or bi-weekly talks from people in industry coming in. Some people would set up their own businesses. Some people would come from companies like Stella McCartney. And it was actually really good because we'd have Q&A sessions, and also you'd be speaking to people who are in luxury fashion and then some people who have done it themselves. So people who started kind of from nothing in a smaller businesses. I found that more helpful only because I could ask more questions about things like finances and, you know, the more business side. So my school was really good. And in terms of podcasts, I usually listen to stuff that inspires what I'm going to do. So for me, it was mostly about my history, or just, I like listening to things when I'm working, otherwise I can't zone in. So a lot of my inspiration comes from music and rap and podcasts. But in terms of the business side, I think the fashion school was amazing, but I wouldn't have known what to ask if it wasn't from speaking to people who have their own businesses and growing up around that, I think, for me.
Yeah, I found the my side of the design school, there wasn't as much about, I think because it's so split into subjects, I think a lot of illustrators leave like wanting to be freelance but not knowing how to do it, because in terms of things like freelance tax, you know, like time management is covered a lot, but in terms of tax and like actually physical invoicing, not just like how to price work, but actually physically invoicing people, chasing up paid invoices, like how to approach things like that, and actually how to do like the maths of it for a course that has a lot of neurodivergent students. It's difficult seeing students leave, like not knowing how to do that, being worried about it, because actually, like if you don't have the support network there that can help you out with it, you know, I would never have, like, how would I have even done my tax return? I probably just wouldn't have done it. You know, it's
yeah. How do you find that
things.
the juggling, when you're a freelancer, you wear many hats and you have to juggle a lot, you have to do kind of every kind of role. How do you find that in terms of like coping with, like at one point having to actually come up with something really creative, but then also chasing an invoice? It's a real kind of like shift. How do you kind of like?
It was actually, I thought I'd find it harder than that was. I found it good to compartmentalize my days. So I'd have a Friday, which was admin and like invoicing, and I'd do all of that. Like I'd sit down with a coffee and I'd have like a later morning. I'm just going to do all of that today. I'm going to email so many people to look for work. I'm going to do so much of this. I'm going to do so much of that. And I did that one day. And then I think by the time that I took on, when I was like finished my freelancing, I was on 4 days a week for one client and 1 day a week for another client. So I'd lost that day of admin. So I was working on a Saturday as well. But when I first started, it was like 3 or 4 days on a couple of different clients. And then I had my Friday for admin. So I found that really useful to compartmentalize my time. But in terms of switching between different roles, I already like have a very fast moving brain anyway. So I find that not easy, but I like doing it and I find it very energizing. But I found it very helpful then going into a job after that, because it allowed me to switch a lot easier between different types of work, you know, different illustration styles, different marketing, web design, illustration. Like I can switch a lot easier now because I've learned how to compartmentalize, if that makes sense.
And do you find do you find that the skills you learned as a freelancer now really kind of applies to your work, that you've learned to be able to kind of time management? And
definitely. Yeah, it helps so much, even in terms of just like getting the job that I have now. I was like very like emaily. I was like, I would really like this job. Like I like know that I'm not a web designer yet, but I really want to do this, and I'm going to sort of learn to do it anyway, but I'd really like to learn to do it here. I was like very honest, and I kind of approached it how I would approach looking for work as a freelancer, which I think was quite beneficial in terms of then how I started. I was like, I value my time and I value my learning process, and I'm excited to be here because I'm here because I want to be here. And I feel like every day is a learning curve, and I because I took it on knowing that I can do this as a freelancer, knowing that I have that skill set, and knowing that I have that confidence as well that I've built from really like nothing. I had no confidence when I became a freelancer. I was so stressed. I was like, I can't do any of this. And actually knowing I can do more than I thought I could has actually put me in really good stead now, starting a job with people who like really know what they're doing, you know, and people who have a lot of experience. So yeah, I think it's like, it just gives you a really good attitude to then go on and actually learn from people. So
yeah, kind of teaches you to, I guess, I always kind of think the skill of being able to teach yourself, learn, is something that's just so important.
definitely.
to be able to learn fast is like, to have that skill of learning fast is really important. I feel like freelancing really kind of gives you that, forces you to learn fast. And
yeah, you have to just
quickly
say, oh, I can do this, and then you're like, crap, I have to learn how to do this. You know,
yeah,
I had a lot of that, but it was good.
We've touched on it a little bit, but in terms of the mental well-being in the last 18 months, you know, working in an agency and working at home, you know, has been challenging. And many times when we work in an agency, we have a whole team of people to be able to rely on. We have a really supportive kind of senior management team. But how, in terms of like almost like the loneliness of being a freelancer and working for yourself, doing the kind of being there, doing stuff for yourself, how do you guys kind of cope with that, or what any kind of techniques that you've kind of learned along the way?
Well, I don't know if anyone believes in star signs, people are probably rolling their eyes, but I'm a Gemini, so I either
I am as
love
well.
are you as well? Okay.
Yeah.
I either love being by myself, I love my own company, but then equally I'm super sociable. So I actually moved back home from my uni flat in January. So I was home, and we live now in Hertfordshire, so not in London anymore. So I'm really weird, it's just us in the countryside kind of thing. And my mum had to go to India to care for my granddad, and I have a 14-year-old brother, so I was looking after him while my dad was going to work. So for me, I was already very, very overwhelmed with what was going on at home. And then I was doing my last year of uni, and then for some reason I thought, oh, this is so clever, why don't you decide to start freelancing now? And I'd started a podcast that same time. So I was like, you're being so smart. In my head, I honestly thought just doing more was going to keep me going. And there were some points where I genuinely have never felt so overwhelmed. And you kind of want to scream, you don't know what you want to do, what to do, who to talk to. Yes, your friends are only a call away, or your family are a call away, but it does get overwhelming. And I remember I was sitting in one of the rooms where I was sewing every day, and obviously no one was in the house except me all day, and I was enjoying it, but to the point where I was getting used to it a bit too much. So the thought of socializing for me, as someone who is such a sociable person, was freaking me out. So it is, yeah, it got very daunting. But then once you start socializing again, it's completely fine. But one thing about freelancing made me realize I definitely want to do that and I love it, but I will need to work in a team at some point, because like me going to work for my dad, for example, and working in a team and having those daily conversations and feeding off everyone else's energy, and it gives you a different motivation, it gives you a structure that you sometimes don't have when you're by yourself. I'm much better with time when I'm around other people, because we're all doing things. Also, just having things like breaks to have a quick chat, like my breaks would be podcasts, or yeah, I'd call a friend. But even that, at some points, I know a lot of people found that too much because you were used to not doing it. So yeah, it was daunting 100%. On my mental health, there were points where it was, I'm going to be honest, I might as well, I've gone through depression, I've suffered really severely from it, and also my mum did, so I've been around it, and I know sometimes I can recognize when I'm starting to go down a bit. But like I said at the beginning, the CBD oil helped me so much. Sometimes if I had creative block, I would change and do something. So like you were saying about the admin, I would go, okay, right, I can't create today, but I'll go and do something more academic maybe, or go and read something that will help. But yeah, it's hard. You just have to, I don't even know what to, I don't know what you have to do, but I think everyone's different.
Yeah. A sense of community, I think, is really important, isn't it? Like to be able to know that other people are in that same situation, same boat, and to feel like you can rely on or speak to people, I think is kind of an important aspect. Certainly for me, knowing people that even just expressing, anytime it gets really hard, it's just expressing frustrations and worries always helps, I feel.
I agree.
Did you have a similar experience in terms of just how did you kind of maintain mental well-being during freelancing?
I also get very anxious, and I have experienced burnout before, especially when I finished my degree. So I've definitely, like, I know when I'm getting really bad, but I kind of struggle to take time off. Like I really did struggle, because I think you're not just starting like a business, you're starting it while you also have to stay at home all the time. So splitting up your personal life and your professional life is pretty much non-existent. You know, I was sending emails from bed, you know, like at 12 at night. You know, I was constantly updating websites and constantly working, and I just really didn't stop for like quite a few months. And it wasn't great, to be honest. I didn't deal with it very well. I think I just thought, oh well, I have nothing else to do, so I'm just going to work, which, like, yes, is fine. But actually, in terms of like looking after yourself and giving yourself time to take time off and look after yourself, it's really not great. But all the things that I would do normally to relax, like go swimming or see friends, or, you know, go out, go to gigs, I couldn't do any of that. Like even hiking, I just couldn't do it. And yeah, it was difficult. You know, I have my family in England, so I didn't see them for quite a while, and you're in a shared flat with friends where your relationship is now changed, and you're running a business from said flat. It's just a bit of a difficult one. I wish, if I was to do it again, I wish I'd taken more time out and taken more time to look after myself and just have days off and read, rather than being constantly like ticking over and constantly focusing on that, because actually there gets to a point where the longer you work on it does not necessarily mean that it is going to be doing anything. But I think just the networking side of it was, so I have to do it all the time. But I definitely got more of a, when things started to open up again, I got more of a balance. But I just think, yeah, it's important to take that time out, even though it feels like you can't, or you're not allowed to, because you've not made any money, or it's
so many different pressures on. That's not, but it is almost like an essential part of it, to be able to recharge your batteries and make sure that you're, you know, kind of looking after yourself. But yeah, I think thanks for both for sharing. It is really, I think, great to hear those kind of stories. We do have a few questions, which I think Kath, I don't know if you've got them to hand.
Yes, hello. I can feed them in. Yes, we've had a few come in. We'll probably have time for pretty much what we've got at the moment. So the first one came through from Indra, if I'm pronouncing your name right. And it was directed to Op. I actually think would apply to both. It's kind of 3 questions in one. So struggling with time management, and what are your tips? I think you've touched on that, but if there's anything else you haven't. And then also, when did you register as self-employed? So Op, I don't know if you want to go first.
So for me, I have a planner, which it has a list for the start of the week, so I can plan out my week and all the like to-dos, like important to-dos I need to do, and then a list per day. So for me, like, that has completely changed like my life. Ticking it off is actually, like, ticking off things on a list has been proven to like increase endorphins in your brain, so it actually helps you do more things when you tick off things on a list. I also love fun facts, so if you didn't notice. So yeah, like just doing a list every single day, and having somewhere that's not just random bits of paper, that has notes, and, you know, like a separate sketchbook for all of like my creative works or meeting notes and everything like that, but actually something that have things like eat breakfast, drink coffee, go out for a food shop, like have a meeting, do all these things, but also do the basic stuff like have a break. I've put that in quite a lot. Is really helpful. And I also listen to the radio all day, which helps me like figure out, because I tend to like hyper focus when I'm working if I'm really interested. So having the radio on, where a different DJ obviously comes on every like 2.5 hours. I know when Marianne Hobbs comes on, as 6 music, when Marianne Hobbs comes on, I'm like, oh, it's 10:30, I need a coffee now. Like, that actually is really helpful. And then when it gets to 4, I'm like, oh, okay, right, now I have 1 hour left and I need to really focus for this hour, because, you know, I've maybe not been focusing as hard as I could do for the last like 20 minutes. So I know that that is really helpful for me understanding how time is passing, which sounds quite silly if, you know, if you're someone who like understands the concept of time. But for me, like just having that reminding me that the time is different to when I last looked at a clock is super helpful. And I didn't actually register as self-employed. I registered as a sole trader. There were like different, you can register as a limited company or you can register as a sole trader. I registered as a sole trader because it was less paperwork, and I wasn't sure like what the scope of the work would be or how long I would be self-employed. So I did that, and I thought I can just be limited if it's going well. And that like worked for me, really. I did it quite soon after I started, but you only have to do your tax return if you earn over £1,000. But even then you have to earn a certain amount before you pay tax. You just have to do your tax return. I don't know if that helped, but yeah, there are different types of self-assessment, self-employed, but I am a sole trader. So I hope that helps.
Resources and the follow-up on that as well, but that, I think what you said was very helpful. What about you, Nikita, with time management and things?
Last year I kind of worked it around my brother's pickup time for school. So that helped me. I love Google Drive. I think it's the best thing in the world. So I use all the Google Sheets for my organization, spreadsheets. I use the Google Drive to make notes. You can get stickies on your laptop as well, which I recently discovered, and I think they're amazing because I also keep a diary, but my mum doesn't like it when I get diaries because I'll write in one page and then forget about it and then end up getting a new one, which is probably not the best thing. But I used to just use scraps of paper and sticky notes, which I realised wasn't the best thing to do because I'll get lost. So yeah, I kind of store everything on my laptop with the Google Drive and everything like that. And in terms of relaxing while I'm working, I also listen to loads of podcasts and the radio, only because I can't focus well in silence at all. I need to have music or something to keep me going. And most of the time, the music I listen to, like there'll be a Tupac lyric or there'll be some sort of lyric, and I'll be like, oh, that's really useful for my research. And that usually, every single thing I've created almost is inspired from music. So I usually have music on in the background. And in terms of being registered, so I'm also not registered. My dad actually, he kind of hires me. So his accountant does all my tax returns. So I don't actually have to do it.
Amazing.
Yeah. But I do want to learn. I just think, whilst I was at uni, I knew if I'd done that, like, you know, you were saying about burning out, to know when to stop is so difficult, and I knew I'll stop that. So.
I know a few freelancers who swear by, like, they go, just get someone to do your accounts for you. It's so much easier. Yeah. But you have to pay them, obviously. So like there's a bit of a payoff, and you have to pay them to do that. But that is an option if you really not into that.
I think we have one more question and then I'll hand back to you, Charlie, to round up in a minute. But Alex was asking, did any of you get clients thanks to freelancing websites such as Fiverr or Upwork? Just think a good one.
I've got work from the Dots before. It's like not as it's not necessarily work, more like collaborative work. So when I was in like a really low point, I was like, I do want to work with other people and do something. So I was working with Yuck magazine, and we were like working together because the guys were in a similar position to me, but it's more like peer-to-peer collaborative work I found. But I haven't heard great things about Fiverr. I know it's like not a lot of money, and it kind of undercuts the market a little bit, which isn't amazing if you actually are wanting to price yourself properly. It seems like people are sort of contacting you like, oh, can you do this for not a lot of money? And you're like, well, I can't pay my rent with that. So no. So Fiverr, I kind of steered clear of it. And I know friends who've done the same, but the Dots is good in terms of like peer-to-peer networking. I found that really helpful.
I didn't use either of those. I genuinely did loads of my freelance clients through Instagramming and then emailing. And once I got some contacts from Instagram, I DM magazines as well who would do interviews. A lot of them ended up being some student magazines, but that ended up having a whole different demographic in itself. And what I found really helpful, it depends on how much you want your face out there, because I know some artists genuinely don't like it and they like to be quite private. Or I think sometimes it depends on your level of confidence if you like speaking or not. But I did quite a few podcasts or chat rooms or interviews like this so that I could get myself out there and people could see my work, because even if it's just one person, it helps for me quite a lot.
Yeah, great stuff. I think we may have run out of time. Is that right, Gath? We may have run over time, actually. So yeah, just a massive thank you to both Nikita and Ott for sharing so many great tips and insights into the world of starting out, and best of luck to both of you. I think your work is absolutely amazing. Both of your work amazing. So I think super exciting to see you guys start out on your careers. And yeah, massive thank you to Creative Edinburgh for letting me host.
Thank you for hosting us. Thank you all. I'm actually